We are here today to discuss a major public health issue. To the men in this audience, find out if you have caught feminism. Do you believe that women should have the right to vote, go to college, drive a car, open a bank account in their own name, enjoy sex, work in whatever occupation they might choose, and get paid the same as men when they do the same work? Did you answer yes? Then you better lie down. You've probably caught feminism. The feminist contagion has spread far and wide. It infects both women and men. Most people in North America, Europe, and many parts of the rest of the world have caught it. The terrible, terrible, terrible truth is that nowadays most of us support these rights and actually see them as basic rights of individuals in a democracy. Here are some questions for concerned individuals. What was it like before we had to worry about being infected? Well, for one thing, women had none of those rights I just listed. Ask your mother or grandmother. As recently as the 1960s, she had to get her husband's signature to open a bank account. How did this contagion spread? Well, not by women being ladylike. Women spent 100 years campaigning for the right to vote and winning it first in New Zealand. They fought for a century to control their own bodies and work alongside men in jobs of their choice. Yeah, but aren't things equal now? This disease is relentless. Give them the right to vote and they want the right to equal pay. Give them that and they want child care as part of our public education system. And who knows, when they fully get that, they're going to expect an end to rape and sexual assault and partner assault in all its forms. This disease knows no bounds. What are the two main symptoms? The symptoms are simple and terrifying. It starts as one empirical observation about the state of things, quickly followed by a moral position about how things should be based on that empirical observation. That's all it takes. So here's what to watch out for. The empirical observation is that in our society, women and men are still not equal. Beware if you find yourself noticing that men still form a big majority of those who run governments, major corporations, universities, religious institutions, and media conglomerates. Beware if you find yourself losing sleep because women earn far less than men. The moral position that follows this empirical observation is even simpler. It should not be this way. This is a contagion that spreads everywhere. Feminism can spread into every nook and cranny. We're not just talking about public life or jobs or pay. Once the virus invades a person, it starts a mutation in their personal life. You start thinking that in our personal relationships, women deserve to have total respect and dignity, if you can believe that they should be a partner in all decision making. Does this virus target men? This virus really has it in for men. After all, it doesn't believe that male biology causes men to pillage or rape or not listen. It actually believes that men are basically good. That men can and should be ethical, emotionally present, and accountable to our values in our interactions with women as well as with other men. Women who've caught feminism not only expect men to act in honorable ways, but also have a deep belief in our ability to do so. Beware, my friend. This is very insidious stuff. Well, why this book, The Guy's Guide to Feminism? My work over the past 32 years has been engaging men and boys to promote gender equality, to end men's violence against women, and to really transform our ideas of what it means to be a man. This work, of course, is not an attempt by two men to define feminism for women. That would be absurd. But what it is, it's a reflection of what Michael and I have learned over the past 42 years, really, 45 years now probably, from our sisters, from the women who have inspired us, academics, activists, friends, who've inspired us to rethink the world of men and women, to rethink our lives as men. And so within that, though, we wanted to reflect some of that back to men. There's a lot of confusion among men about what feminism is. Most young men, most older men even, agree with ideas of gender equality. But they wouldn't say, I just read a poll in Canada, which I can't quite believe, but they asked men and women, do you believe in gender equality? And a full 99% said yes, which was quite astounding. I thought maybe 98% at the most. So it was quite incredible. But if you said, are you a feminist, obviously we're going to get a very different response because there's still a lot of confusion about what it is. And of course, this assumption is, well, we have equality now, let's pack up and go home. So again, it's to try to reflect to men some of the main themes and ideas of feminism. And so I want to make one thing clear, though. Even though this book is, as you can see from that first reading, is taking the piss out of men in a way. It's making fun of some of our ideals of manhood, as you'll see in other readings. This isn't an exercise in saying men are monsters. I don't think that men are bad. I don't think we're monsters or anything like that. Although I do think that some men do some monstrous things. But this is a positive chance to engage men and boys in talking about the themes of feminism. Well, one of the big issues in feminism and feminist thought from the start was around language. And so L in the book is for language, words that make women disappear. Here we go. There once was a woman named Leah. Her boss called her my lovely assistant. Her boss was the amazing Crisco, a famous magician, or so he said, who performed in cheesy nightclubs. Leah, though, had a problem. She kept disappearing. Now, I'm not referring to disappearing in the hackneyed tricks he did that were so flimsy that even an 8-year-old could see how they worked, but in the words that he used, in the words used in newspapers and textbooks, in the words on television and in religion. At church, for example, Leah wondered why Noah's wife didn't even rate a name. At the museum, she wondered if there were only ancient men and cavemen, or if they also had a few women along. She wondered how humans had reproduced over the eons when it was only a story of mankind. When she read about politics or business, she noticed it was always a chairman in charge, even at the odd times when the chairman happened to have a vagina instead of a penis. She wondered why the nice woman who delivered the mail was a postman, all evidence to the contrary. And even when she and other women made an appearance, she felt diminished by the words used to describe her. She was 30 years old, and she still got referred to as a girl. She was strong, capable, and yes, lovely woman, but she still got called chick, as if she were a fluffy little plaything. One day, Leah read about an interesting study. Researchers asked some corporate hiring types, HR people, how much salary they would pay a certain woman. Half of these corporate hiring types were given a description of a 35-year-old woman. They talked about her training, her capabilities, her experience. The other half were given the exact same description of a 35-year-old woman, the same qualifications and so forth, except for in this description, she was referred to as a girl rather than a woman. And so how much were the hiring types how much did the hiring types think that she was worth? Well, the ones that were hiring the, quote, woman said she was worth £7,000 more a year than the ones hiring the, quote, girl. Leah read this and realized that language really does matter. She started dreaming of a world of humans and humankind, of letter carriers and committee chairs, of ancient humans and grown women who actually were called women. She told the amazing Crisco that she was happy to be his assistant, at least she thought, until she learned the tricks of the trade herself. But she refused to be described as lovely and insisted she be called my most capable assistant. After all, she was the one who knew not only how to disappear, but how to come back in her full glory. Well, we started working on this book actually 20 years ago. Now, you might think we're awfully slow writers for a little volume like this, but things have changed in the past 20 years. We had written a few excerpts. We had shown it to a literary agent. She said, "Oh, I love these ideas. There's no way we can sell this book to a publisher." Men were just seen as irrelevant 20 years ago to ideas of promoting gender equality. They figured there wasn't a man on the planet who would buy the book, or maybe one, but or two, and they were the authors. So they said, no, come back later. So we came back later, but what had happened in those 20 years is the continuing impact of the women's movement. You know, when you think about it, the feminist movement is really the greatest transformative movement in human history. What has happened in the course of 1 or 2 lifetimes, in spite of all that remains to be done, is quite staggering. So during this time, part of that impact of feminism has been on men, and a greater willingness among men to listen to these ideas, to listen to the voices of women. But also within the women's movement, I think a growing acknowledgement that if we're going to overthrow patriarchy, if we're going to transform gender inequality, if we're going to change all this, we have to find ways to engage men and boys. Well, much has changed, but one thing that hasn't changed is that we continue to have attacks on women and on feminist women. And those attacks take many different forms, but that we still have this ongoing backlash against feminism. This comes out in different ways, of course. One is the belittling of all the concerns of feminists. Nowhere is this clearer than in the term politically correct. You get that here too, don't you? Don't be so PC. Well, I guess I should change pictures because P is for politically correct. Those are the PC police. Man, he says, you're being so PC. A guy can't be a guy anymore. Here we have a remarkable example of the backlash against feminism. The phrase politically correct actually started as a joke back in the 1970s among feminists and others involved in movements for social change. Anyone remember that? Do you remember? Did anyone here remember that? I do. Am I the only old fart in the room? Anyway, it was a joke. It was a way of poking fun at ourselves, of saying in effect, yeah, let's work hard to change things, but let's not be total dicks about it. In a remarkable turnaround, though, this phrase was hijacked by anti-feminists. They turned it into a sort of Trojan horse to be used against anyone who thought that what we say and how we might act actually affects other people. Let's say you ask others not to use racist or sexist or homophobic terms or jokes that make some people feel offended or even threatened. Hell, such things should offend everyone. Or you say, let's use inclusive language, you know, his or her, humankind, that sort of thing. So you tell this to another person, and what happens? You get accused of being politically correct, as if you're the KGB and have the power to send them to Siberia. So when a person is accused of being politically correct, reality is inverted. It's turned upside down. Here's how it works. As a thoughtful, caring person, you know that certain language or behavior can cause hurt. Of course we know that. So you change some words you use, or you ask others to do the same so no one gets victimized. What do? The backlash people? Well, they say you're being PC. They say now they're the victims. They put you on the defensive. They deflect criticism of their behavior. They make you feel like the perpetrator of a problem, and that they are the real, and they feel, and that we're the perpetrators of harm, and then they get to play the victims. And while playing the victims, they add a really nice twist to it. They say that feminism is all about women acting like victims. It's enough to take your breath away. What started as a form of lighthearted self-criticism among feminists was repackaged as a way to undermine them. And yet there's more irony. There actually are those out there who want to limit women's choices and impose their own. You know, those very people that are throwing out the, oh, don't be so politically correct, are exactly the people with, these rigid moral, religious, economic, and political standards they're trying to impose on the rest of us. So I'd say we should choose PC. There's a kernel of truth in all this. Politically correctness is, well, correct. It's fair, it's right, and it's honorable. The opposite of political correctness is political wrongness, I guess. What is unfair, exclusive, and hurtful. So at the risk of sounding a bit self-righteous or overzealous or over-earnest at times, we choose right over wrong. And we'll do our best to laugh at ourselves when we do, at least some of the time. Well, there's different reasons for the backlash. One reason for the backlash Oh, and by the way, that does make me angry. One reason for the backlash is that if a movement is challenging 8,000 years of power and privilege, it's obviously going to disturb that half of humanity who've had power and privilege. You know, think of it. We've had the greatest affirmative action program for hiring that the world has ever seen. It's called patriarchy. For 8,000 years, we've hired only men. We've promoted only men. We've exalted only men. We've said that men are closer to God, and on and on and on. So yes, there's going to be a few with their noses out of joint. And so part of the backlash is that resistance to change. But part of it is also this strange sort of thing. It's because one of the things that feminism does is it challenges men to rethink who we are as men. It says to men that some of the ways that we've defined manhood, this armor-plated masculinity, not only don't work well for women, but they don't work so well for men ourselves. And this causes a lot of insecurity among men, because part of the ways that we've constructed masculinity is through ideas of, macho and machismo. So, of course, M is for macho, machismo. This is in the form of an interview, so I've got to play two parts here. Michael, let me ask you a few questions, if I may. Sure thing. Michael, what's it like having such a big dick? Well, let me just say, it's pretty awesome having equipment like I do. Except when you're standing in front of a group of people, like right here, and you worry it's going to start poking out the bottom of your pant leg. I guess that's trouser leg here, yes. Famous interviewer. Now, Michael, I read in one of your autobiographies that you actually felt an emotion once. Yeah, I did. It's true, I did feel an emotion once, and I'm a man enough to say so. It was a bitch, though. I just had all my arms and legs chopped off. They were not just chopped off, they were slowly chewed off by this whole pack of friggin' wild hogs. And right then, the waiter came up to me and wanted me to sign the credit card slip. And I don't mind saying, I was pretty pissed off. I had a feeling, let me tell you. Wow, that's awesome. Have you ever met a girl who didn't want to get it on with you that very second? To tell you the truth, it did happen once to me. I just met Mother Teresa for the first time, and I got no vibes from her at all. Strange but true. What's it like being, the boss around the house, the king of the castle? I wouldn't have it any other way. Boy, I said to the wife when we first met, wife, or future wife, I guess it was, to make good decisions, to be rational, to lead the way, you need balls. Not figurative ones, real balls. There's something about the chemical composition of sperm that puts you in charge. Am I right? Am I right? Yeah, you're right. Just take it easy. Take it easy. You're the man. You're right. I'm the man. Now, the thing about macho and machismo, we can make fun of it, but it's actually really tragic. Let me tell you a story. And this story isn't tragic. This is a wonderful story, but when we think about where it goes, it becomes tragic. So, the most wonderful moment of my life was when my son was born. Now, as you may have seen in some bio or something for the event online, I do have two children. I have a boy and a girl, so I don't want you to think me a raving sexist, to think that you're looking at me like I'm a raving sexist. My son's birth was the greatest moment of my life, and what about your daughter? My daughter's a stepdaughter, and for some reason, the parents didn't invite me to the birth. I don't know why not, but they didn't. Anyway, so the most wonderful moment of my life was when my son was born. Now, picture this scene. There we are in the delivery room, and I'm rolling up my sleeves just thinking of, delivery. That's quite interesting. Boil the water. So there we are in the delivery room, and my kid had been born like 5 seconds, and I didn't yet know if it was a boy or girl. Now, it's not because Canadians are dumb. We do, know the difference, generally. I know it's more complicated than that these days, but, anyway, I knew. But I didn't know if this was a boy or a girl because I had so many tears in my eyes, I couldn't see the little thing. And I mean the little thing on the little thing. I didn't know if it was a boy or girl until the nurse spoke. Now, up to this point, she'd been speaking in her normal voice, and suddenly her voice dropped down really deep, and she said, "It's a boy. What a strong little fellow." And I was totally shocked. not because it was a boy. I'd taken high school biology. I kind of figured there was a 50-50 chance around that one. But I was shocked by the change in her voice and what she said. And I knew if it had been a girl, her voice would have gone up a notch and she would have said, yeah, you got it, that's right. She's so cute, she's so pretty. My kid was 5 seconds old and he was being measured for his first football jersey. What happens, and this happens to boys and girls, we bombard them, we pummel them with these ideas and ideals of masculinity and femininity from birth. And we used to think that gender, and gender socialization as it gets called, was just like stuffing our heads with this information about, be a girl, be a boy. We'd like sort of divide the world in half, qualities in half, capabilities in half, possibilities in half. But the truth is, what is actually happening is more profound and more insidious. Because human biology gives us a natural capacity to become gendered. Because what happens, our brains are so underdeveloped at birth. 90% of our brains actually develop after birth, unlike many other animals. And literally, in a newborn baby, every single day is creating millions of new neural linkages, new connections in their brains. And what are those connections about? They're literally absorbing physical and social reality. They're taking it into their developing brain. Not to intellectually yet figure out the world, but just to be in it, be part of it, be one. And so when we hold a baby boy or girl differently, when we talk to them differently, when we give them different toys, when they look out at how, if there's a mommy and daddy around or just mommy and daddy figures around, even in a household with 2 mummies or 2 daddies, they absorb in this reality where gender difference matters, where sex difference matters, and where we have these fixed ideas about what it means to be a man or woman. We become limited. It actually affects our brains. It actually shapes our brains. Our bodies become gendered. Everything from what feels comfortable about how we walk, to how we smoke a cigarette, to how we talk, to how we occupy space becomes gendered, as does our brain. So even though I make fun of, us, and my brothers and myself in that reading, it's actually very tragic. And it's tragic for 2 reasons. Any gender is a drag, as the rock star from the 60s, Patti Smith, said many years ago. It limits us. And part of the women's movement, part of feminism, has been to reclaim the half of humanity, the half of human possibility that was denied to women. But what, meanwhile, is happening to men? Men tend to have not as much reached across that divide and said, we reclaim that too, but instead still try to live up to these impossible ideals, these impossible standards. You will not have feelings. You will not show pain. You will not just need to be loved. You will not need to be hugged. You will not ever be wrong. You will never be weak. And on and on and on. We set men up for failure. We set up this impossibility. Now, I want to be clear here. This is not an excuse for abuse by men. This is not an excuse in any way, but it certainly is part of an explanation. Now, of course, feminism is not just against various things. It's not just about what women have been against and are working against. It's also been a very positive movement for change. Things that transform the lives of women in many different ways, and I think transform the lives of men. Now, one of our objects in this book is we're aiming, it's I think a man of any age could read it, but we sort of had in mind a younger man in his 20s, 30s reading this. And so part of what we want to do was reflect things that we may have learned over the years. So that leads us to one of the positive, many positive things within feminism, but something we really wanted men who are engaged in heterosexual relationships to know about, and that is O is for orgasm. This is a conversation in bed, man and woman. He said, "Wow, that was amazing." She replied, "Yeah, in a 19th century sort of way." Now sleepy, he muttered, She said, "Lots of cultures, including our own, didn't think that ladies needed to have orgasms. They didn't even think we should enjoy sex." Oh, sorry, that's crazy. Oh, sorry. I'm just gonna close my eyes here for a minute. That doesn't ring a bell, does it? Anyway, I'm just gonna close my eyes for a minute. Then he had a strange dream. There were women marching on the street, carrying placards and shouting slogans. The signs in their chants were identical. "We demand the right to come." He asked one of them what all the fuss was about. She said, "It's very simple. We have the right to sexual pleasure just as much as you." He said, "Of course." Another said, "Some of us prefer having orgasms with another woman." He said, "I'm cool with that." The first woman said, "But you see, you take orgasms for granted. If you have intercourse, you'll probably have one. We women are all different. Some of us come having intercourse, some don't. We like having our clitorises stimulated, but we all have our own way of enjoying it." I'm, if I say so myself, pretty talented in bed. Do you talk? What do you mean? Well, how are you going to know how she gets off if you don't talk about it? Well, that's kind of awkward, isn't it? Maybe at times, but if you both talk about what you like and don't like, then sex is going to be better for both of you. Stands to reason, I guess. So what? So wake up, you fool, and start talking. Well, yes, O is for orgasm. But let's take another issue that's been in the news a lot lately, and I know certainly in North America, but I'm guessing here as well. There's been a new onslaught by those who are opposed to women's right to choose, women's reproductive freedom. That's happening here too, starting to get stoked up a bit, is that? This is, as you all know, a huge thing in the US, not as much in Canada where I live, but where the right wing is trying to roll back the advances made in reproductive rights. Let me find the right thing here. So one of the major themes, of course, in the past and present in the women's movement has been the pro-choice movement. P is for pro-choice, abortion. Let's get one thing straight. Nobody wants to have an abortion. Abortion is usually a method of last resort for a woman who has become pregnant against her wishes, contraception doesn't work, against her will, rape or incest, or against her better judgment. No one is pro-abortion, as the anti-abortion forces would have you believe, just as no one is pro-appendectomy. Abortion is a medical procedure performed when a woman considers it necessary. It is not frivolous. For many women, having an abortion is a difficult decision. No one thinks it's a fun way to spend an afternoon. Feminists are no more pro-abortion than the Pope, when they have a Pope, I guess. They are, however, pro-choice. The right to choose to terminate a pregnancy is one concrete expression of the right of a woman to control her own body. Do some women have an abortion because either they or some guy stupidly ignored contraception? Yep. It happens. But such stupidity, although not admirable, shouldn't be a lifetime sentence, turning two people into unwilling parents and creating an unwanted child. The right to abortion as a legal medical procedure varies around the world. As men, we support the right to choose because it increases the chances, for one thing, that we too will be parents by choice rather than by bad luck or stupidity. And we support it because we believe that the women we care about shouldn't be forced to have a baby they don't want. As men, we can be proud of the rich history of men supporting a woman's right to choose. Nowhere is that more true than in Canada where I live, where Dr. Henry Morgentaler, who's pictured here, went to jail for 10 months in 1975 for opening public clinics where abortions could be safely performed. And to add just some extra feeling of his sacrifice in going to jail, he's actually a concentration camp survivor. So to willingly go behind bars like that again, this guy was a hero and is a hero. He's still alive. The right to choose allows each woman to search her own conscience and make the decision that is best for her. That's why feminist women support individual women who say they could never have an abortion themselves. And so we say to men, imagine what your life would be like without bodily integrity. Guys we think that, this is my body. And if you try to touch it without our consent, there'll be hell to pay. Why shouldn't each woman have that same feeling of integrity, that it's her body and no one gets to decide what happens to it? Well, speaking of serious issues, there's probably no more serious issues that women around the world are dealing with than issues around violence. It's been the area of my major activism over the past couple of decades, working to end men's violence against women. One example of that is certainly in the news a lot these days is around honor killing. It's been part of the work that I've done in Turkey and even in Canada, where I'm happy to say there's a new group of Muslim men called Muslims for White Ribbon, taking the name of the campaign that's working to end among men working to end violence against women. So let me read you an excerpt about, a very short one, about honor killings. How could murder ever be seen as honorable? How could something that brings shame and dishonor to families, communities, and nations ever be confused with honor and dignity? It happens if we have a society where men think it is their right and their duty to control women, in particular their sexuality. Now, we've had honor killings around the world. We've had it in North America, where I'm from, such as in the southern United States in the decades after the Civil War, where a black man could be lynched for so much as looking at a white woman. Such were obviously racist murders, but they were also based on the belief that white women were the property of white men. We've had honor killings in Brazil and other countries when a jilted husband murders his wife and her lover. Supposedly, such was the only way to restore his honor. We have honor killings, even if not called that, right here in the UK. When a man murders his ex-wife or ex-girlfriend. We have them when a man kills another man to prove he isn't gay. They too feel they are restoring their honor. But the honor killings that are most in the news these days happen in some predominantly Muslim countries. They happen when women are seen as men's property. They have happened when a young woman defies her parents and dates or marries a man of her own choosing. They have even happened when a young woman has been raped. In such cases, some fathers and brothers feel it is their right to murder this young woman who supposedly has brought dishonor to their family. Such murders are illegal, although until recently were often tolerated. Now more and more Muslim women and Muslim men are speaking out. Such crimes are being challenged because murder is murder. Well, one of the themes of this whole book is not only what the issues that feminists have raised and try to reflect that back to men, but posing to men, what are the issues for us as men? What should we be struggling with? What should we be thinking about? Well, we have a little entry here on violence, 4 reasons why it's an issue for good men. The majority of men, right here in England, don't use violence in their relationships with women. But there are at least 4 good reasons why all men should care, why all men should speak out. First of all, it can happen to the women we love. Our wives, girlfriends, mothers, daughters, sisters, workmates, and friends are the victims of violence, or they might live in fear that it could happen to them. We want to make sure their lives are free of this fear. 2, men look to other men look to guys to define what it means to be a man. So even if we're the most loving, respectful guy on the planet, and if we don't speak out to end the violence against women that occurs around us, guys will sometimes think it's okay. Some of our friends, our sons, our brothers, our fathers, and our neighbors might assume it's their right to use violence and assume that other men say, that's just fine. Third point, violence out there has a way of poisoning even the most loving relationships between women and men. It's hard to put your finger on this, but if a woman has experienced violence in the past, and over 1/4 of women have, in some countries it's a half, sometimes it's 3/4 in a few countries, have experienced physical or sexual violence alone. Or if they're experiencing harassment at work or at school, or if they have to lead a cautious life out in the world in fear of violence, that creeps into all of our relationships too. It's like the way you feel, guys, if you get a stone caught in the groove of your running shoe. It may not actually hurt you, but you sure know it's there. The 4th reason why violence is an issue for men, by violence against women. This violence makes women suspicious of all men. For example, it's nighttime and you're walking down a deserted street. A woman is walking towards you, but she crosses to the other side, so she won't pass you. You might want to say, but I'm not like that. I'd never do you any harm. But what we should say is this: man, am I pissed off at the actions of some men and how they tarnish how women see all of us. So violence, why it's an issue for men. Now, I'm proud to say that now around the world, more and more men are speaking out against men's violence against women. And by the way, I spent the past week partly at the UN, at the Commission on the Status of Women. And this year's theme was violence against women. And one of the things it's an amazing event, gathering of NGOs and governments and so on. But one of the things that struck me at one point was how we're leaving out a word in that. We keep referring to violence against women. It leaves out a key word. The violence isn't being committed by, birds. It's not being committed by, earthworms. It's being committed by some men. So I think it's important, at least sometimes we get that word men in there, men's violence against women. Well, I'm proud to say that around the world there are more and more men that are who are speaking out against this violence. I was, including in the campaign, the White Ribbon Campaign, that 3 of us started in Canada in 1991. No funding, no organization, no nothing, sitting around the kitchen table and said, we've got to do something. We were challenged by the women we cared about to speak out. We started this campaign. Within a couple months, it had spread across Canada. It spread rapidly across Canada because of the impact of the women's movement over 10, 20 years. There are a lot of men who did care, who were looking for a way to speak out. And it spread quickly across Canada also because of the impact of a tragedy we had, the murder of 14 women by this disgruntled, angry man. Well, by the end of last year, it had spread to, we think, about 75 countries around the world. Some of these are big campaigns. Australia has this huge campaign. Some countries it's come and gone. Some it's just a small effort by a few individuals. Some countries it's the government that's running a campaign. Because what's unusual about White Ribbon, it's a totally decentralized campaign. When we started it, we weren't trying to create a big organization. We weren't trying to create a franchise. We just wanted to spread an idea. Because we believe that men and women know best in their own country, in their own community, in their own workplace, in their own school, in their own place of worship, how to reach the men and the boys on these issues. So here's, and we started with some fundamental beliefs that most men don't commit violence in their relationships with women, but have remained silent. And if you have men who still control governments, control the police, control the courts, control the media, control religions, if men are silent, then we allow the violence to continue. So we encourage men to end that silence. It's not an act of collective guilt, but of encouraging men to take collective responsibility. It's an act of collective love. The White Ribbon itself is a public pledge not to commit, condone, or remain silent about violence against women. And it's a call on governments to support and properly fund women's programs. Well, here's what it looks like around the world. This decentralized character. In Brazil, they're out there on carnival parades. They've adapted the ribbon. They don't have this tradition of wearing these silly ribbons, but they've added their national color. They've turned it into a sort of an armband thing. They've recruited some famous Brazilians, like these are 4 comedians, looking very serious in that picture, and it says, violence against women is no laughing matter. In some countries, they use traditional forms of organizing. These are men in Namibia and Southwest Africa who were rallying outside of their parliament several years ago when there was a proposed law that for the first time was going to make rape in marriage a crime. The media said, men don't like this proposal, women do, but men don't. These men gathered and said, we support this proposal. In Lebanon, public displays of white ribbons, and you can see all those people there. The idea isn't the display, it's to get people to stop and to ask, what's this all about? And they talk to people. A candlelight vigil in Pakistan. Men signing a public pledge not to commit, condone, or remain silent about violence against women in China. This is the southernmost campaign. These are some Australian sailors in Antarctica. I think they're stuck. I don't know. Anyway, just a cool picture. Bangladesh. This is my favorite white ribbon picture. I don't know can all of you see these pictures? I know they're sort of off to the side. But I love this picture because this captures the spirit of the campaign. This little boy was in his whatever town or city he lives in. And he saw people giving out these ribbons and talking to people. So he said, what are you doing? And they told him, well, this is, they started explaining to him about violence against women. And he said, oh, you don't have to explain it to me because I come from a home where my dad uses violence. By the way, I'm showing you how easy it is to start a white ribbon campaign. You don't need any, there's no dues, there's no secret handshakes, there's no permission. You can even just get a piece of paper and there we go, white ribbon campaign. So anyway, so he said, I know all about it. So rather than just be a victim of violence or even just a survivor, he decided he wanted to be an educator for change. So he said, can I help? And they said, sure. So he's given this white ribbon to this street vendor who's selling something. The guy's looking at it saying, what the heck is this? Or in Cambodian, but my Cambodian is rusty, so I won't do that. And this little boy is pointing to it, explaining to this man about the problem of men's violence against women and why he as a man should speak out. And that's been the spirit of white ribbon as it spread around the world to police officers in Guatemala, these two actors in China, in New Zealand, these sort of everyday men. This little boy there, you can see him. If you can see him, he's in front of some motorcycles. Can you see that picture? He's a Maori, an indigenous boy. And the reason he's in front of motorcycles, this is just one of the many cool things that has happened with white ribbon. These ex-bikers, like motorcycle gang members, they decided they were going to do a campaign to speak out against violence against women. And these are bikers. I mean, leather, greasy leather clothing and tattoos and greasy hair. And anyway, they look like bikers out of central casting. And so what they do is they ride their Harley Davidsons into town. They ride all the way across New Zealand between November 25th and December 10th. They ride into town. They get off their bikes. Men come out to ask them about their bikes. And instead, they tell them about the problem of violence against women. In different countries, we'll use these really macho images. We're just trying to reach men. We're trying to speak out to men. Do we have any rugby fans in this room? Anyone who knows anything? We've got one rugby fan. Do you see what's wrong with this picture from Australia? Yes. The Australian player is wearing, and he's like a big star in Australia, he's wearing the jersey from their hated rivals, the New Zealand All Blacks. And he's saying, the caption says, this is worth the embarrassment. Because I grew up in a country where half of women are going to experience violence in their lifetime, where my daughter is growing up in a country where half the women experience violence. So if wearing this jersey, he says, will get Australian men to notice, to think about this, it's worth the embarrassment. Groups have adapted the white ribbon to make it their own, like our indigenous peoples in Canada who've added one of their traditional symbols and developed some posters talking about the choices that they made as men. Images of, using our strength not to hurt. Here from the UK. The idea that the actions of adult men have an impact on young men. So I've been proud to be part of that. Well, one of the great themes of feminism, I've got about 10 more minutes, I just want to read you a couple more. Well, first, actually, before I do that, I just want to say let me read this. One of the great themes of feminism, of course, has been the reality, the realization that we're not stuck with our gender ideals. Feminist theorists were the first to make the clear distinction between biological sex and socially constructed gender. And so there was this very fluid idea that we're not stuck with these gendered ideas. And there was just a panel just before this one that really sort of was challenging, confronting these sort of narrow notions of what constitutes gender. So I know you've been dying to hear what the X entry is. X is for XXXY. This is set in a bar. So, this XY chromosome pair sidles up to a pretty-looking XX at a bar. He says, "Hey, hot stuff, how about your type hooking up with my type?" She replies, "And what type is that?" He says, "Sweet pea, I'm from Mars, you from Venus?" She looks at him blankly. Undeterred, he says, "You know me, man, you woman, different planets, right?" You tell me, I'm just a dumb XX. The XY tips back his hat, looks her up and down. Well, the way I see it, you and me are different. Head to tail, top to bottom, different bodies, different brains, different behavior, all because I'm XY, and you're XX. The XX sips her drink slowly, as if trying to decide what to say. Finally, she replies, you know, for centuries men said that because of our biological differences, we shouldn't be allowed to do one thing or another. Some said we were too fragile. Some said getting an education or doing certain jobs or being assertive just didn't fit in with being a double X. By the way, out of character or out of reading, do you know why women, one of the reasons why women were denied the right to go to university in the United States in the late 1900s? This is so, I mean, it's almost cool because it's so absolutely insane. So the theorists said that if women got an education, their brains would grow and their wombs would shrink. And these were like these sort of, middle class, upper middle class white folk who were worried about, whites, being overwhelmed by others. And so they wanted white women, white middle class and upper class women to reproduce a lot. So they said, don't go to university because brains will grow and that would cause energy to go to the brain from the womb and the wombs will shrink and you won't have babies. Now, it's actually true. Well, this part isn't true, but what's true is that when women get more education, they do have less babies, but not for the reasons those guys thought. Anyway, so she's saying, for centuries you guys said that we weren't capable. The XY throws his arms up in the air and says, that ain't me, babe. I think women are every bit as smart and capable. So? Just that we're different. We speak different languages. We hear things differently. Hey, in some ways you're better. You got that better connection thing between the two sides of your brain. What was that? I read about that. And she says he's, the corpus thing, the corpus callosum. He goes, yeah, corpus callosum. Corpus callosum, yes, I read that too. Well, it turns out that research was totally bogus. It isn't a bigger connection in women than men, and females and males. But people still refer to that research as if it proves that our brains are supposedly intrinsically different. Anyhow, we are different. The XX sighs. Look, I'm sure you mean well. He nods eagerly. But I gotta break it to you. The research that says we're completely and categorically different is all pretty silly. One psychologist has poured through every single study, thousands and thousands of studies on biologically based differences or in traits or behavior. She found that in 95% of cases, women and men are more similar than different. We share 99.8% of our genes. See, he said though, there are some differences, that 0.2%, man, he says. Yes, but there are far more similarities. So you don't think our brains are fundamentally different? You're confusing two things, nature and brain structure. You see, our brains are always changing, she says. That's what happens when we learn and when we experience different things. It rewires our brains. If we raise girls and boys differently, give them different opportunities, present them with different role models, encourage them to play different things, of course it will affect their brains. You're saying, I'm saying that our society shapes our brains. Here's an example. You've heard that boys are better at math than girls. Well, in societies where there's higher equality, girls' math scores go way up, and in some cases, they end up being way better than boys. So that's XY. This theme of the capacity of men to change has been a major theme of my own writing, both nonfiction and my fiction writing, such as in my novel, The Possibility of Dreaming on a Night Without Stars, which in this novel, what I explore in that is it's really about men and the search for love. It's about this guy who is middle-aged, who is stuck because he's been looking for sort of this social ideal of the perfect woman. And it's a story of one summertime and his search for love and what he learns about love and life and himself along the way. Because I believe, and we believe, and I think feminists believe very strongly, that men have the capacity to change. Well, I don't have time for another reading. I'm just going to say a couple more things. I wish I could read our Our W is for waves, to talk about the waves of feminism, from first wave feminism to get the right to vote, to second wave feminism in the 60s, to third wave feminism, which is confusing the whole picture and raising many, many new things. But we'll have to leave that for another time. But what I would like to say is this. I'd like to share a story with you about the capacity of men to embrace equality. This was told to me a number of years ago by a colleague from Pakistan. He came from the Swat region of Pakistan, which at the time I had never even heard of. It's been in the news a lot over the past couple of years, an area of sort of fundamentalist organizing, of warfare. It's seen as this remote tribal region. So he came from the Swat region, and he goes off to the capital, to law school. And while he's at law school, there's a coup d'etat. A general comes to power. And this general, in order to curry the favor of the fundamentalist types, enacts a set of laws called the Hudud Ordinances. I'm sure some of you have heard of the Hudud Ordinances, because the most infamous one said that if a woman was sexually assaulted, to prove it, she had to come up with 4 male witnesses. Guess how often a woman could come up with 4 male witnesses? Never. What would then happen? She would then be charged with adultery. And if found guilty, she would then be thrown into prison. Could be for life. She could be executed. So this guy comes back from the capital, from law school, sees this happening and says, this is not right. He says, this isn't what I've been learning as the Pakistani legal tradition. And of course, he's also a Muslim. So he says, this is not what I believe my religion is all about. And so he starts defending these women. And he won. He got them off these charges. Well, the response of the powers that be was to trump up a charge and throw him into prison. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever been in a prison, for work, of course, but prisons, even a wealthy country like England, are the worst places on the planet. That's what prisons are. They're the absolute worst. But that's true in a rich country like England. Imagine what a total hellhole he was thrown into in the remote Swat region of Pakistan. But it gets worse. Imagine what happened to him. Just imagine what happened to him when the other male prisoners found out why he was in prison. Just imagine for a second what they did to him. And whatever you just imagine, you're probably wrong. Because when the other male prisoners found out that he was in prison for defending the women in their communities, they all went on a hunger strike. And this wasn't a place where food was bountiful. They went on a hunger strike and they said, we will not eat until you release our brother who is defending the women in our communities, until you release him from prison. And they won, and he got out. Now, I'm not saying to my brothers in this audience that you've got to all go to prison and risk your lives to this. But you've got to risk something. You've got to risk something. Because we as men live in tremendous fear about stepping out of this box of masculinity, about embracing not just the ideas of feminism, but the type of personal transformation that was embodied in the feminist slogan, the personal is political. To challenge ourselves, to challenge our brothers, our sons, our fathers, our friends, to speak out, yes, against violence against women, to speak out against violence among men, to speak out against forms of abuse, forms of domination that have gone on far too long. And what we say as men, this isn't just about words or a book. This is about our life. This is about speaking out so women are no longer standing alone in their heroic fight for change, but the men with respect, respecting women's leadership, respecting women as our partners in many different ways. The women should not stand alone, but we are going to work to be at women's sides. But we're also going to reach out to other men in ways that may be a bit terrifying. And as we do these things, as we embrace this possibility of change, what we are doing together as women and men is creating a far better world for women. But you know what else? We're also creating a far better world for men. And most importantly, we're creating a far, far better world for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you very much. Thank you.